thank you everyone for attending. My name is Lisa Ebar. I'm the Director for Human Resource Management, and I'm glad that you all were able to take time out of your very busy schedule to attend the presentation that we've arranged with the Teachers Retirement System. We have a representative here today, and I'm looking forward to you all hearing the information that she's going to share. I think you will find it informative. Her name is Dana Vigner, and she is an assistant director. She's quite informed in terms of her knowledge base with the Teachers Retirement System, as well as the optional retirement system. She's going to address topics that I think each and every one of us are very interested in, such as the upcoming legislation, bills that have been introduced. She's going to talk about the cost analysis, and I think she's going to be a great resource for us. The presentation is scheduled to last about an hour, and she's also going to be available to do some questions and answers, so please stay as long as you're available to do so. And at the end, I'll just remind you of some wrap-up issues that we have pertaining to the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Dana to come up here, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Still morning. Good morning. It's nice to be here. I'm glad Lisa asked us to come and do this presentation. What I'm going to give to you today is actually a presentation our staff attorneys did last week at the Baton Rouge campus to the LSU United group, which went into some demographic information, talks about the funding of the plan, how it's funded, which works for also not only the defined benefit group, but also for our ORP participants to understand how that employer contribution rate that goes into your account is determined. So hopefully it'll be good information. And then once we get past that, we will go into legislation, bills that will be impacting the system this fiscal year that we are monitoring and looking at. And there are a couple of ORP bills for those members that they may be interested in. I am Dana Vigner. I am the Assistant Director of Retirement Services for Teachers Retirement System. I've been there since 1995. So I cover the retirement processing, the member information center, all of those customer service areas. So if you talk to one of my staff, they're doing what I'm overseeing. So with that, we'll move on. First, just the demographics of the defined benefit plan. You will see that membership in the defined benefit plan has steadily decreased. Of course, the change from 12 to 13 was the privatization of the medical centers. It played a big part of that. For 12 and 13, also in the K through 12 arena, with Act 1, which revamped tenures and Common Core and all the things that the governor put in that particular bill. We had a lot of teachers that decided that they were eligible to retire and were not going to go through the new processes. They were just ready to go and they left. So we've seen a decrease in membership. We've seen an increase in retirees and beneficiaries as a result of that. So members who may not have retired because they wanted to continue work and decided they didn't want to learn something new, decided to retire. And of course, drop participation over the years has decreased, and we attribute that to people are more informed about drop and whether it's good or bad for them, but also the fact that now drop participants don't earn 0.5% less than what the system earns. They're actually earning money market rates, which right now are basically zero. So if you know what you're getting on your checking or savings account, that's about what they're getting. In the ORP arena, you'll see that in higher education, we have a little bit more than 50% of the members that are in the defined benefit plan versus the optional retirement plan, and that's all higher education as a whole. But in the LSU system, it's the opposite. More members tend to join the optional retirement plan versus the DB plan. The next couple of slides are going to get into pension funding, actuarial methods, employer contribution rates, present value, and this is to kind of explain how that rate's derived so that you understand how it's calculated and what it means. In 1990, when ORP was established, In the statutes, they put in that the employer share would be what's considered the normal cost portion, and normal cost, and I'll get into it a little later, but that's the portion to fund the current year's benefit. So that's what would be transferred to ORP participants' accounts along with their employee contributions. The rest of the employer contribution is the UAL payment, the debt payment that the state owes from prior benefit increases that they didn't fund, market losses, etc. So only the normal cost portion went. And in the 1990s, that was about 7% of the employer contribution rates. It's only been in the last 5, 6, 7 years we're starting to see that normal cost drive down, and there's different things that cause that. But basically, to explain the funding and how we get there, we start with pension funding. Teachers is funded on what we call an actuarial basis. So we have an actuary come and value the value of the assets using certain assumptions, the value of the liabilities, and there's certain formulas to do that. She performs this annually, so annually everything is reevaluated with the assumptions that are in place. And then the cost of the benefits for the members are paid over their career. So every year a member is paying the cost of their benefit. The employee contribution that they make is part of the normal cost, and then there's a piece of the rate that the employer pays. So with those contributions and the investment earnings that the system makes, and hopefully make what we expect to make, which is currently 8%, that funds the benefit. So those two components. Oops, went too far. That valuation is used to determine what the employer contribution rate's going to be. So we have what's required, it's in statute, and it's in the Constitution, and it's broken into those two parts. Again, normal cost is the present value of the benefits for that year. So that 1 year, that's what they're paying for. And the amortization payment is what's needed to pay the UAL, and that again is in statute. There's a payment plan that requires that the UAL through 1988 be paid by 2029, and it's a backloaded escalating payment, so it keeps going up. And then of course you have any UAL since that time that's done on level payments. So those two components, they are distinctly different. One is for funding the benefit that person's earning, and actually that is the amount that goes in the ORP accounts also. So for this year for higher ed, ORP participants are getting 5.189% as the employer match. That's the normal cost that the employer is also paying to fund the DB plan participants' benefit. Of course, in the coming years, that's expected to go down, and there are several reasons for that. Up in July, right now, if the valuation is approved as is, the normal cost for ORP and the DB plan, but for ORP participants that's going to be transferred to your account is going to drop to 3.66%. And I'll explain what's happened to cause that drop. Through the process, we use an actuarial cost method, and that's how we value the assets. So for us, ours is the projected unit of credit, and this is actuarial science. I'm not an actuary, so I don't pretend to be able to be well versed in it. But it's in statute, it's what's used, and it costs out the present value of the expected benefit for service credit earned that year. So that method's used to get that benefit, or what the normal cost, and then it's spread between the employee and employer. The present value, to get to that number, there's certain assumptions that the actuary is going to look at. They're economic assumptions, so we look at the investment return that we expect to get, the salary growth, how is salary increasing over the demographics, and inflation. We also look at how retirement rates, are people retiring when we assume they're going to retire, or are they retiring earlier or later? Are they staying in the system like we assume? Mortality, are people dying when we say they should die? I know that's morbid, but that's basically what it is. And then, of course, disability rates. You know, how many people do we assume to go out on disability retirement? So all these factors are looked at, and they're used to determine the present value and that normal cost. So if there's a change in those things, it impacts the normal cost portion. We look at the assumptions on a 5-year basis. So we take a look back every 5 years and we say, are we meeting the assumptions or did they change? And when the last one we did was actually in 2012. And we looked at the mortality rates, we look at the retirement patterns, we look at the withdrawal patterns, disability patterns, investment returns, all of those items. And if we're not meeting the assumptions by looking at the look back, we have to make adjustments. So the actuary will adjust those assumptions. And again, that does play into normal cost. And there were changes that happened. Specific in the higher education arena, we saw increased withdrawals, so more people terminating prior to their vesting or reaching retirement eligibility. We also saw some delayed retirements, and we had to update those assumption tables. Of course, the privatization was the main big impact because there was a lot of people that got pulled out that either caused them to retire sooner than they normally would because they were no longer eligible to be in the plan, or they're sitting there possibly pulling their funds out because they're going to be in some other plan with the private entity. So all of these things cause the normal cost for higher education to go down because it doesn't take as much to fund the benefit based on the current demographics that we have in place, and because those patterns changed. Any question? I went through that pretty fast, and it's a lot of actuarial information, but ORP participants and DB participants pay the same amount for their normal cost to fund their benefits. So the employer is paying the same rate for a DB to fund their normal cost of service credit as they are paying for the ORP participant that goes in the ORP participant's account. The UAL payment is just that. It is a debt that is owed the system, and the debt is spread evenly across all plans and paid by all employers of the plan. Because now, if you're not aware, there are sub-plans in TRSL. Higher education is a sub-plan. It has its own employer contribution rate. It's not an aggregate rate. K through 12 has their own employer contribution rate. And they differ because the normal cost of each plan differs because the demographics of each plan is different. So it's just the way that the system was developed. So is there any questions on funding? Deer in headlight, yes.
I'm trying to understand the percentage that goes into our retirement accounts as an ORP member that the employer match, that we actually realize in our accounts. Are you saying that that's the same as the normal cost?
Yes.
And so, and that normal cost is adversely affected by privatization?
Let me repeat the question for the benefit of the audience. She was asking whether the amount that the employer puts into the ORP account that matches is the same as normal cost, and the answer is yes, it is the same as normal cost, because by statute that's the amount that we can put in an ORP account is only the normal cost portion. Her second question is whether privatization impacted that normal cost, and the answer is yes, privatization did impact that normal cost because the demographics of the higher education community changed. Your membership changed.
I thought I had read in the newspaper that privatization was going to be helpful to the unfunded accrued liability. Because they were projecting that there would be fewer folks retiring in later years, but that's a different.
UAL portion is a different calculation. While it's all part of the employer contribution, there is the UAL component and the normal cost component. So yes, it could impact the UAL if there is UAL over the years that would be done, it would be lesser because there's less members that we have in the system that we're actually going to pay benefits. So you're taking away part of the liability, but it does impact the normal cost portion.
So does the reduction in the employer contribution affect the employee contribution? Are we going to be paying the same amount or less or more?
Good question. His question is whether the reduction in the employer normal cost contribution impact the employee contribution. And the answer is no. Normal cost is done as a total number. You as ORP participants, just like your defined benefit TRSL regular member participants, pay 8%. That's in statute. It does not change. And so anything, the total number of normal costs, we back off 8%, and that leaves whatever the normal cost is for the employer match that they pay. So really only the employer gets impacted up or down.
Total will be going from 8 plus 5, so 13% down to 11%.
Yeah, with the reduction in the employer's side, yes, as legislation requires us to do today.
Could you just give a little history on the Social Security and how none of us get Social Security?
Sure. Right.
And my understanding is that the employer will kick in 6.2%, the employee 6.2%, and now with this going to 3.65%, this school is contributing to our retirements almost half of what they do to Social Security. It seems like we'd be much better off if we could contribute to Social Security.
Yeah, and this has to do with Social Security. As you know, Louisiana is one of 7 states where the majority of their government or public employees do not pay Social Security. And so whether you belong to the TRSL defined benefit plan or you chose to enter into the optional retirement plan, you are in a plan that is not covered by Social Security. So you don't pay it. The only individuals of the university that would pay Social Security would be those that would not be covered by the plan, which would be some part-time individuals like that. But that's federal. I mean, that's something the state did because when we were formed back in 1936, public teachers and public employees could not belong to Social Security. So that's why the states formed retirement systems so that they would have some retirement plan for the government or public employees. Through the years, Social Security has allowed public employees in. The state of Louisiana has chosen not to do so because of the cost. Once you're in Social Security, you can't get out of it. That's one of the reasons, and of course they'd have to change the defined benefit structure tremendously to add that on. But that, you know, at this point it would take a major piece of legislation to put us in, even ORP. We can't even segregate it out unless ORP became under some other plan and not administered through the state or the defined benefit plan. Then possibly Social Security could be added on to that component, but as it is now, it can't be. And yes, you're right, for those that in private sector, they're getting a 6.2% plus some sort of employer match into their 401k, etc. Universities in other states, they may participate in Social Security. So if they do, then they've got to pay that 6.2% and whatever the university has established as their retirement plan match.
So if you lived in another state and wanted to move to Louisiana to work for this system, and you knew that you were going to get 3.65% funding into your retirement plan, would you come into this state?
I am just the administrator of the policy. While I understand your frustration and concern, yeah, and I do understand it, yes. It is a recruiting issue for the medical centers and LSU and the universities themselves. And there's a piece of legislation that's out there that it should it pass may help with that situation.
And this is from the HR website. You know, it should be stated clearly on the HR website what the contribution is. it says we contribute 8%, and the agency then contributes. Why don't they just put what the contribution is?
Well, currently, if,
Be honest.
yeah, I mean, I am being honest. It's determined on an annual basis every year. That it takes legislation, yes.
Yeah. The website can change. Every July, they can put what the contribution is.
And once it's been determined, yes.
We'll take that into
That's
consideration.
your HR person, yeah. And I will tell you that the rate that I quoted you is not official yet. We have to go before a public employees retirement system actuarial committee. They have to approve the valuation. So once it's approved, then those rates will be official, and we will be sending that out to the HR and employers. So at that point, they can put it out on your website so you know what it is. Yes, ma'am.
So is there a low limit to which things cannot fall below that? Are we headed to zero?
The question is whether there is a minimum amount for the employer normal cost rate, and currently, no, there is no minimum. Under current statute, there is no
So
minimum.
it could go negative?
No, it wouldn't go negative. Question way in the back.
Way in the back. Can we return to unfunded liability just for a second and make sure I understand this?
Sure.
correctly? The ORP monies that are contributed are available, is this correct, to assist with paying off the unfunded liability?
No, the ORP monies, there's no, the employer for ORP participants is required to pay the same employer contribution rate as it does for the defined benefit plan. Therefore, the normal cost is the same for each employer. And the UAL component, which is the debt payment that employers have to make, they also have to pay it not only for the regular plan participants, but also the ORP participants, so that everybody is treated equally as far as what is being paid to the system. That's how it was originally set up.
Gotcha. And then a second, just a little follow-up question. In this, I want to use the legal term conflict of interest. When the lawyers and stuff look at this and do this, do they see any conflict of interest of having one group manage both plans?
No,
Okay.
no. The question was, there any conflict in one group managing both the defined benefit and administering the defined contribution plan? And no, the fiduciary duties are the same. And statute sets out what we have to do as a board for that plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions on funding? Okay. Now we're going to get into legislation. Session starts March 10th and ends June 2nd. We have 27 bills that we are monitoring. Of course, the majority of those do impact the DB plan, but there are 2 bills that impact the optional retirement plan. The first bill by Senator Guillory, Senate Bill 23, would allow ORP participants the ability to transfer back into the defined benefit plan. Yeah. It would be a very costly bill because you would have to pay the actuarial cost for whatever service time you would have earned in the defined benefit plan had you been there. That's the service credit that you would be able to transfer in. You'd have to use your entire ORP account to pay for that. In all likelihood, it's an actuarial cost. The ORP account more than likely wouldn't cover the cost, so there would be what's called a deficit that you could pay additional funds to get that credit should this bill pass. It is totally voluntary. It's not mandatory. It's only for those that are active and contributing into the ORP. And it sunsets June 30th, so they're going to allow it to go over a 5-year period. The other bill is House Bill 6, which is the one I think you guys that are in ORP will probably be most interested in. It sets a minimum employer match at 6.25%. So If the normal cost is below 6.25%, should this bill pass, then employers would pay 6.25 normal costs and whatever UAL payment on its ORP participants. If for some reason the normal cost goes above 6.25, say it goes to 7, the ORP participants would get 7. So it sets a floor. So this is one that it isn't a cost to the retirement system to have this different rate for your ORP participants versus your defined benefit participants. It's a cost to the employer to have this floor put in. So TRSL board, I think, took a neutral position on this particular bill because it's more of a policy decision that the employer and the state need to decide if this is something they want to do. Yes, sir.
Since the employer is the state, how much does each percent cost the state?
Depends on payroll. Depends on payroll. I couldn't give you that.
You have no idea?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. Not off the top of my head, no. Because I don't have the salary data for the ORP participants,
You don't
so
know what it was last year?
not off the top of my head. I'm sorry, no. Somebody back here?
What kind of opposition will we have for House Bill 6, and who would that be?
I have not heard of any opposition. It depends if the employer is going to take the brunt of the funding or if they're going to look for general funds to fund the additional cost. I do know, I believe I've heard that the LSU Baton Rouge campus is going to get behind this particular bill. So if you can get the other universities behind it, it may have a good chance since it's looking at employer costs only and not increasing UAL or doing anything as far as the retirement system because we're just going to pass it through to your individual carrier. I'm not sure. We haven't heard anything of that sort, so I wouldn't be able to tell you if anybody's going to be opposed to it. I know there was a similar bill last year that was put in when we had we were supposed to implement the cash balance plan July 1st of last year, and there was a similar bill that was going to put in a floor for ORP because the cash balance plan, the normal cost of it, which would have been what you would have been measured against because it was your normal plan that you would go into now for the new hires, was like a 1-point-something% normal cost. So there was a bill to try to fix that similar to this last year, and it did have positive feedback from legislators, but when the cash balance plan was suspended for the year, they kind of didn't push it. They just left it alone, so they didn't move forward on it. I had a lady over here first, I think it was, back there.
So if this second one passes and it goes up to 625, is it likely that that gap from the 3.5 to 625 is going to result in a further increase in fringe benefits on grants?
Would you say it again? I'm sorry.
Is it likely that we're going to be charged on our fringe benefits for our grants to cover that 6.25%?
That's a question the university would have to answer as far as where, I think our question is the difference in the 3.6 to the 6.25 is the fringe benefits going to be covered via the grants, the funding source. You're looking for funding source. I can't answer that for you.
And I'm sorry, I can't either. That's a budget question to make those types of decisions. That's not made through the HR office. And I think that there's already been some discussion with the budget office on how, if this bill were to be passed, how they would try to manage those types of increases in the cost. And I do want to digress for just a moment. Mimi Hedgecock wasn't able to be here today, but she was quite aware of the contents of this presentation and knew that Dana was going to be here. She did want me to express, and I was going to do so at the end, but I think it's more appropriate to interject this here, is that the LSU system as a whole and several universities, including the Health Sciences Center, is her representing the governmental affairs offices, have really come together to highlight any legislation such as House Bill 6 and others to come together and study and be as proactive as they can to support this. And so she did want me to communicate and let you know that is a representative of the campus. She's been working already with the other campuses very diligently in reviewing this bill as well as many, many others, she says, that have already been introduced, and does expect even more to be introduced as the legislation session, continues. So.
Yeah, you go.
Is there any change in the employee's contribution in order to bill 86?
No, sir. No change in the employee. He asked if there was any change in the employee contribution and for HB 6, and the answer is no, no change.
What will be the employee's contribution?
Employee contribution is 8%.
Okay, so if that were to pass, so instead of being 300 something, it would be able to go up to 6.25. We have no idea how much that costs the state. It could be 100,000, it could be 10 million. Does anybody, if that were to happen, does anybody suffer as a consequence of it going up? Who gets less because we were getting more? Does anyone in the retirement system elsewhere get less?
No, it won't impact the retirement system at all, like I said, because it's not a cost to us.
So then, following on that, so that's the case, why would you be taking a neutral position?
Because the board feels it's a policy decision for the state. It's not necessarily a policy decision or administrative issue for the board. So if the state chooses to go that route, the board is fine with it.
So it's not really correct for you to go into bat?
Well, we can't lobby. We cannot lobby. We can only provide information, yes. I think I had back and then keep.
So you were telling us that there are assumptions that contribution to ORP is based on what the defined benefit is.
Correct. The contributions to ORP from the employer is the same as the contribution for the defined benefit,
So
yeah.
then it should not be a problem to go back from ORP to defined benefit. If it is equal contribution, the two plans should be identical. Why should it cost more for these people to go back to defined benefit?
Well, it's an actuarial funding cost, because currently we're not funding any liability for any service credit, whereas DB plans have been in the plan over their career, so we're funding for their retirement. For an ORP participant, it's going to be, I'll use somebody example has 20 years in ORP who might want to do this. If you do it, then we're looking at 20 years, you're immediately eligible for a benefit that has not been funded. So you as the participant have to catch it up and pay for the funding, because the system hasn't done that. So that's why I'm saying it's expensive, because we haven't over your career funded a benefit that we may be liable for paying.
But what you said is the match to the ORP is based on what was the liability for funding.
You get an employer match, but your account grows as the market up and down. So if you've done really good, your ORP account may pay for the full funding, but it may not. It's just because it will be expensive, because you're putting an immediate liability on the system, so the cost is usually expensive.
So can you then change from defined benefit to ORP if you want anytime?
Not any time. The current law allows a person, when they first become eligible or are employed in higher ed, to 60 days to make the choice to join ORP or not. If they choose to go into the defined benefit plan, they can in the future elect to go in the ORP if they have less than 5 years. Once they have 5 years in the system invested, they no longer have the option of ORP, but up to 5 years. But if somebody's coming in that has 15 years in the DB plan, goes into higher ed where ORP is now available, if they do not choose ORP when they first go in, they don't have any option in the future. So 5 years is kind of service credit in the DB plan, it's kind of the cutoff. Guy, right here.
My question is, isn't it if you're in the first 5 years and you're in the DB plan, and you elect to switch to ORP, you lose your employer contributions?
That is correct. If you don't go into the ORP when you're first eligible within the 60-day window, you choose to go 2 years later, for example. You stayed in the defined benefit plan. 2 years down the road, you decide you want to do ORP. Well, the employer match for the 2 years prior, you don't get. You'll get the employee contributions can be transferred. The employer does not go, but on a prospective, you get the employer match.
That seems kind of, what's the rationale for punishing people?
That's the way the plan was set up. I can't speak to the rationale behind that. Sorry. 1990 is quite a few years ago, and I wasn't around then.
Okay, the question I really had is, if do you guys keep track of if someone was in Social Security and not in the defined benefit plan, how does the check they receive in retirement compare in size?
As far as the defined benefit versus our defined benefit plan versus Social Security?
Took someone who was forced to be a generic employee getting the same exact salary if they were in the defined benefit plan versus if they were mandated to be in Social Security. How would their check look if they retired at, say, 65 after?
Typically, the defined benefit would pay better. Yeah. That's why our benefit accrual rate is where it's at, because we don't pay Social Security, so they don't have that third leg of the stool, so to speak. So, yes.
You said your position was neutral on HB6. What about SB1?
It's neutral also, same reasons. The board we will implement any policy. It doesn't have a detriment effect to the system. We will implement any policy that the state decides it wants to input. Any other questions? Way in the back.
Yeah, on HB6, I'm assuming by what you said that 6.25 would only go to ORP and the people who are still in the TRSL would get their 3 point whatever or 2 point or pay.
Yeah. His question is, if this goes to 6.25, the defined benefit participants, will they still get the normal cost to pay for their benefit? And the answer is yes, because that's what we need to fund the plan. In the defined benefit plan, the only way that participant gets his employer contributions is through the lifetime benefit. If they were to refund, they only get their employee contributions they paid in. The system retains all of the employer contributions. So we're just really looking on that side to fund the benefit and what does it cost to fund that benefit. So yeah, it would not, they would receive a lesser amount as far as normal cost match from an employer than an ORP participant should this legislation pass. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
I presume that this has to get out of committee.
Correct.
And do we know what committee this is?
Mhm.
What legislators we can contact?
Yes, we do know what committee. The question is, how do you help get House Bill 6 passed? These bills, all of these bills that I'm talking about are referred either, depending on what side drafted them, to the House Retirement Committee or the Senate Retirement Committee. So first, if you want to talk to legislators who sit on those committees, that would be who I would say you might want to contact first, whether you want this or not, whichever bill it is you're for or against. And this is any bill. Talk to those legislators, but then again, you got to get it out that committee. So they're the ones you want to try to explain the merits of the bill or the demerits if it's a bill you don't like. Secondly, if it gets out of committee, then it may be referred to another committee. You just have to kind of watch the process. Not saying that'll happen with this particular bill, but if it gets on the floor, that's when you can talk to your own representative or senator about the merits, or why this is a good bill, or why shouldn't you vote for this bill. So it's kind of all in what Lisa was talking about, from the governmental affairs person about how you go in to talk to them and present your case and things like that. But she'll probably get into more of that if you want to.
Yeah, I was going to add this at the end, but again, I'd like to interject now. State employees are prohibited from lobbying. So if you are interested in contacting a senator or representative regarding this. You have to do it on your own behalf. You have to do it in an off-campus type of placement. You cannot use a state computer. You have to be on annual leave if you're going to travel to Baton Rouge or anything of that nature. So please be aware of the restrictions related to our capacity as state employees.
How do we get David Bitter's office when we're calling my office?
Good question.
That's a good question.
This TRSL plan, is it insured in some way, or is the state going bankrupt and then everyone's responsible?
Well, the state hopefully is not going to go bankrupt. There's no state. The Constitution guarantees it. The state guarantees it. There's no state that's going bankrupt. So, and we're here for the long haul. I mean, we have people in the plan for 70, 80 years. The life of the member through their active service, the life of the member as a retiree, and then their beneficiary if they designate one. So we're long term.
But if the state went bankrupt?
If the state went bankrupt and the system had no funds, then it's possible the federal government may have to step in, and there's pension benefit corporation, so guarantee corporation, things like that. That private sector goes into when a corporate plan goes under. I don't foresee that happening. Yes.
So the 6.25%, I don't really understand how the state legislature works. I guess nobody here does, but when that number was first put out by Mr. Pearson, is that something that's negotiable in the committee or afterwards, or is that
Its question is whether the 6.25 could be negotiable in committee. Yes, it all could be negotiable in committee. They could come back and say, well, no, we're only willing to do 5. Or they could come back and say, oh, we'll do 7. Yes. And it can change through the whole legislative process. It can be changed on the floor. When it goes over to the Senate side, if it makes it there, it can be changed in Senate retirement. It can then come back Senate floor, it can be changed again. And if it has to go back over to the House for concurrence, it can be changed in conference committee. So until it's all said and done, you don't know what you're coming up with. And that's just normal legislative process. Any other questions on these two bills? Yes, ma'am.
Do we know which committee will be?
This will be House Retirement Committee. And if you can kind of watch the legislative website, I think House Retirement is going to be meeting on Thursdays. I'm not sure what time, but you can go out to the site and you can check it. They typically put out a schedule the week of and kind of list the bills that'll be on that particular agenda. We do put out through our legislative e-news, if you haven't signed up on our website, there's a way to sign up for newsletters for the members, retirees, but we have a legislative e-news link too that we send out updates on what happened in committee on certain bills, whether they got out, where they amended, did they fail to get out. So you can kind of watch it, and usually we update that the day of or the very next morning, depending on when that committee's held. So even ORP participants, even though you're not members, you also can sign up for that e-news notification and get those notifications on legislative issues. And we put them out on our website. We update our legislative. We have a sheet out there with all these bills listed, the board's position, and then as things happen, we update where they're at in the legislative process. So those are ways for you to keep up with it. Any other questions? Okay, the following bills are more to the DB plans. If I can get it to work. There is a bill by Pearson on the DB side to change the retirement eligibility for the defined benefit new hires or new members into the system. From currently it's 5 years of service credit at age 60. He wants to change it to age 62. So similar to Act 992 of 2010 that set up the 5 at 60 for new hires at 5 at 60. This is just raising that age. And it won't impact current members. It's only new members into the system. Okay. Is it not liking me? Huh. One bill for DB plan members that you want to really watch is HB 80. This is a bill by Representative Miller that actually is going to restrict how we invest funds. So it kind of handcuffs our investment staff. It deals with alternative investments, which are private equity, venture capital, opportunistic investments, things that it takes a big plan like ourselves to get involved in and invest in, but the return on these investments over the last 10 years have gained us 12.85%. So they are a big part of our portfolio. He's wanting to restrict the amount that we can invest in those types of vehicles. Also did some things with fixed income and real estate. They don't want us to own golf courses. I don't know if you read the news, there's a couple of smaller municipal systems that have gone in the hole by owning golf courses. So unfortunately, this bill is probably more geared to fix problems that happen in the smaller systems that don't have access to the resources that the bigger systems do, but we all got dumped into one bucket. So this is a bill that the board definitely opposes, this because it will limit what we're able to make in the market. If we can't have access to these vehicles where we do our asset allocations to fund the system, it restricts us a lot. And that restriction, if we're having to reduce our 8% hurdle rate to, say, 7.5%, has an immediate impact on the employer contribution rate, particularly the UAL component. Senate Bill 13, this is the change, the valuation method we're currently using. I remember we talked about the PUC, the projected unit credit, and how it's used to determine the funding levels and things like that and the contribution rates. Entry age normal is another method. PUC is kind of you're cheap when you're young and new in the system and you get more expensive, so your costs go up when you're older. Entry age normal is you cost the same no matter where you're at, so it's level. So it levelizes the normal cost and playing field. Now this could impact normal cost also because you're changing the method you use, and I can't remember what it did it changes every year, so I'm not sure what it did. I think it increased normal cost slightly in the current review. So, but that's another one to watch. This is a bill we support. We tried to have this change the last 2 sessions and we're not successful. Senator Peacock is running this on his own, but we're supporting that. There are a lot of bills to help pay off the UAL, that big debt. These have to do with, one, Pearson's bill is sweeping the experience account. The experience account is an account where we put what we determine as excess earnings above the 8% after we pay $200 million to the UAL. 50% of that goes in an experience account, and that experience account is used to pay cost of living adjustments to retirees when we can fund them. So he's wanting to sweep the balance of that account to pay the UAL. The board's opposed to this because back in 2009 we did agree to allow them to sweep the account because they restructured the debt payment to assist the state, and that was our olive branch and our good faith effort with them. Say, okay, we'll let you do this because we feel there's a need, but we don't want them to think that anytime they can come in and sweep the funds that are designated for a specific purpose. 86 is basically going to increase the hurdle, so basically put more to the UAL. Senate Bill 3 by Guillory, so all the gaming going on, he wants to take 3 cents per pull and use that to pay off some of the UAL in the system. He tried this last year, but it didn't get out of committee. And 22 is with the legalization of marijuana for medical purposes. 5% of any revenue generated from this, he wants to help pay off the UAL. And we're all like, okay, we'll take the money.
Question?
Yeah.
What form is your opposition to some of those
Let me get back, hold on. On Senate Bill 3, the board supports. Senate Bill 22, the board is neutral. HB 483 and 86, we oppose.
Right, but you told us earlier that you were respectful.
Hmm?
You have to be neutral.
No, we don't have to be neutral. It's the position they decide to do when it's policy. Which is, what we were talking about was benefits and policy of benefits. This, they just, the 43 they oppose on principle because they've already given. And they felt that they've done their duty. And they want to stop it from happening more so. And it's impacting a section of the membership. 86, same thing, because Act 497 also did that. So they want that plan to work. It hasn't been in place long enough. 3 is money into the system, so anything that's money into the system is good. And 22, I think, because it just had marijuana in it, they felt they needed to be neutral.
So you can lobby.
We can't lobby. We cannot lobby. The board can say whether they oppose, support, or they're neutral on a bill.
So you could, in theory, support that HB 6.
We could, in theory, support it. They chose not to. They chose to stay neutral.
You're not legally forced to stay neutral, you chose to.
The board chose to stay neutral. Return to work, I don't think there's a big push in higher ed specifically here for return to work. And all of these bills except for HB 29 impact K through 12, so I won't go through them. But HB 29 would impact higher ed in that currently the only way a retiree can come back to work in the higher education community is, one, they have to be what we call a grandfathered individual, means they were a return to work retiree prior to June 30th of 2010, or now there is a provision for them to come back as an adjunct professor and earn up to 25% of their retirement benefit. This bill would actually open it up. They could come back in any capacity and earn up to 25% of their retirement benefit in the higher education community and K through 12. It leaves some other specific exemptions like the grandfather and some critical shortage pieces that are particular to K through 12, but it does kind of open it up for higher ed a little bit more than what it has been. Any questions on return to work? Because if you're like me, once you're done, you're done. And I won't go into the others since they're not really applicable to the higher ed community. Permanent benefit increases, while we're all active, so this doesn't impact us, but we're able to put money in the experience account. We do have enough to fund a 1.5% cost of living adjustment, or PBI as it's now called, for eligible retirees. Their Senate Bill 21 is actually the board-sponsored legislation. The board, if there's enough funds and certain criteria met, must do a resolution and request the PBI be granted. This bill is the legislation to grant it. It has to go through the legislative process. 31's a duplicate of it, 4's a duplicate of it. So there's several bills out there. In the past, PBIs, when we've been able to fund them, all legislators are jumping on board to co-author these bills. This year, there is a faction that may oppose PBIs for retirees. So it'd be a little bit different process potentially than it has been in the past. Senate Bill 17 also adds in that if there's funds available remaining in the experience account after we pay the 1.5%, that a supplemental benefit also be given. So in our case, the system can only fund up to about a 1.6%. So if this bill were to pass, then retirees would get about a 1.6% increase. Now in state employees and school employees and state police, they may have a little bit more funds in their account because it doesn't take as much for them to fund a COLA as it does for teachers to fund a COLA. So those are just benefit increases for retirees. And this is interesting. Representative Barrow is wanting to do a constitutional amendment to set up what she's calling the Senior Supplemental Fund. in the Treasury where it's credited with 10% of non-recurring revenues. And what this would do is actually pay a supplemental benefit. It wouldn't be considered a benefit increase, it would be a one-time payment. The minimum it could be would be $300, and it's like a 13th check for retirees who are eligible. The employer contribution bills all have to do with the MFP funding of K through 12. Their funding includes payments for the retirement contributions, specifically the UAL payment. These do deal with, instead of it flowing through the K through 12 employers, it'd be paid directly to teachers. HB 28 is going to allow a person to revoke their decision to participate and drop within 72 hours of them making application. Not sure who they're trying to assist there, but there are means to get out of drop that are, if you haven't crossed your drop participation date, so I'm not sure where this one's going. Membership bills, they're wanting to pull membership or disallow membership on a go-forward basis for individuals who are employed with the unions, LFT, LAE, the Resource Center, and Apple. I'm not sure if y'all have unions up here. I know that LSU United is a part of the LAE union system. I'm not sure if y'all have anything, but if this were to pass effective September 1, new employees coming in wouldn't be allowed to join. Existing employees who are members stay in until they terminate or move on. And 63 is just a disability language cleanup bill. We're kind of watching it just to make sure they don't change any provisions on us. That's all of the legislation. Of course, you can always contact us at any of these phone numbers or email, webmaster. Our offices are open 8 to 4:30 to answer your questions. Yes, ma'am.
Can you make a presentation available to us?
Yes, ma'am.
And second question was, who represents us on the board? And can we contact them with their opinion?
The higher education representative is Mr. Robert Lawyer. His contact information is actually on our website.
So who is he?
He is a professor at Delgado Community College.
And how does he get there?
He's elected by the defined benefit membership. ORP doesn't have an official position on the board or a membership, and you don't get to vote on who represents, but he would be the one. Also, Dr. Jerry Bodin, who used to work for LSU and was the higher ed representative who retired, is now a retiree representative on the board. He was there when ORP was instituted, was a major player. He would be another one that I would suggest that if you want to talk to a board member, that's who I would direct it to. He's very familiar with the ORP plan. Back in the back.
Is that a statutory requirement that ORP does not have a representative on the board?
Yes.
In other words, we got screwed 20 years ago.
Well, I won't say anything.
So again, I guess that goes back to my original question, because of the things that you've reviewed today, I guess I have a hard time understanding why the lawyers don't see that there's definitely a conflict of interest, because of the things you've reviewed today, it is very much of the things that you all were willing to support. It's very pro-defined benefit and nothing for ORP. And so it's always been a question of how can a one entity where we have no representation represent us in the way that we would like, or where we have a voice in the ORP. And even if it was 20 years ago, that was 20 years ago. And so how would we go about that? But how, at this point, how do they stand up and say there's no conflict of interest when you have a group speaking for two different groups?
You'd have to talk to the lawyers as to how they got to their decision, but the way the plans are set up, they're set up under the umbrella, the plan for us to administer it. The funds get transferred to an external entity that you then work with as far as managing your funds. And the board has a duty to choose carriers and funds that they feel would be good and available for you to use. That's their fiduciary duty. As far as the statutes and what they're charged to do is to administering that plan. But they also have a bigger duty because the defined benefit plan is run quite differently and there's a lot more pieces to that particular thing. But I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to even try to get into legal conflicts of interest with you. That's not my preview. If you haven't talked to our legal team, I would suggest you maybe do that. And they can better explain it than me, the layman who doesn't know all of those things. You're welcome. Yes?
So following up on that in a way, I guess, is it your office which decides how we can invest our money? I mean, so a few years ago, our options were changed. If we wanted to invest in real estate, for example, we could do that, and they took that away.
Yes.
And various other things.
The board does do that, yes. The board is responsible for choosing the carriers and then approving the investments, and that's in statute that they're supposed to do that.
So is anything of that going to change in the future?
It may be changing, and it may be in, what they did a few years ago was narrow down the funds available. There was such a broad spectrum. They had actually a consultant come in and look. He did a review of the whole ORP plan, what the vehicles that were offered for you to invest in, and also looking nationally what other ORP type plans had. So that's what caused the big revision in what was offered. We're actually starting that review again because it's been about 5 years to look at that. There's a potential they're going to add like some more life cycle fund type things. I'm not sure if they're going to be adding anything else. I would say that if you're interested in something that we currently don't have available or haven't approved to be offered, that you write into us and let us know, and then it can be at least presented and reviewed and decided as to whether that's something we want to add.
I'd just like to say that anything that we used to be able to put money into a TAA pref, that was taken away, gets put back again, so we can choose some other options again.
You like the big wide variety? Yeah.
Well, I like,
Yeah.
I want to put my money
More.
into losing money.
Yeah. Right. Those are being reviewed, so there's potential for some change. But yeah, if there's something specific that you were looking at, I would say just let us know. I can't guarantee the board's going to make a change or add to or whatever, but it's good for us to know what you're looking for or what's not there that you would like to see.
Well, a lot of things that replaced what we had before have done worse.
Really?
Significantly worse.
Mm.
So, I mean, if we're going to get less of an employer contribution,
Yeah.
to try and get better results from
Okay.
we do that.
Yeah. I'll bring that back. And that's good to know. I mean, very good to know. Anything else? Well, thank you for your time. I know this is a bit difficult topic, but I appreciate y'all coming out and listening. Hopefully you got some good information.
Additionally, she's going to send her PowerPoint presentation to my office. We'll send it via email as we did announcing this presentation. And as soon as the video is available, we'll send that link out, and that'll be on our website as well. So others who weren't able to participate, or if you'd like to view it again, you'll certainly have that option to do so. Thank you for everyone taking the time.